Officially live now. I'm going to pull up my phone here and check and make sure that Facebook knows that we're supposed to be live and YouTube and all that. And we'll see if we get a few people joining in. You know, we were talking about several different things before the show when we were kind of getting set up, and we've got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Some of the history of Caddo, and even when they tried to bomb Caddo or maybe one of the bridges. So we got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about tonight. What do you think, Dan?
It's got a lot of history to this lake, and unfortunately, a lot of it's just being lost and not told. There's an awful lot that needs to be remembered about this lake.
Yeah, there is, and of course, one of the other things you and I were talking about before the show was as I've really started fishing Caddo the last couple of years, I've kind of been digging into some of the history of it and the ferry boat traffic and steamboat traffic and all that, and it just really does have a lot of history. And honestly, that's part of the reason I love to bass fish, but that's part of the reason that I bass fish Caddo so much is just that history that's there.
And the lake itself has probably gone through three major stages. Back before, when the log raft was still in, that stretched all the way to Natchitoches. That's what really formed the lake and made it what it was. And that was the key to all the barge traffic. And then around in 1875 was when they actually cleared the log jam.
Mm-hmm.
And you went through about a 25-year period to where it was really just kind of a big grassy swamp. Barge traffic pretty much quit. And then I guess it was somewhere right around 1900 when the oil companies came in and said, that's it, we're either going to drain it or we're going to dam it. And they dammed it. Yeah, today now, since about 19.
Yeah, and I think, didn't they raise it, what was it, like 2 feet or whatever when they built the dam and the spillway right there? Something like that?
Yeah, I think the first overflow spillway is about 2 foot higher than the actual run through there.
Yeah.
The chase.
All right. Well, what we're going to do, folks, we've got, I don't know, looks like about half a dozen, maybe a few more that have already joined. So we're going to do, if you're new to the show, we've got a guest on tonight. And so we'll talk about our guest here when we return. But what we're going to do is go ahead and do a countdown. So I've got like a 5-minute countdown timer. And that allows people time enough to see the Facebook notifications and YouTube notifications and click and join in. The analytics generally say like between 8 and 12 minutes. And so we don't want to get too far into the topics until people have had time to see the notifications. So I'm going to hit the countdown timer here in just a second. And while that countdown timer is going, go get you something to drink, good glass of sweet tea or lemonade or, I don't know, beer or whatever you like to drink. Maybe make some popcorn or something like that. Tag some friends. Share this out. Text message some friends. Let them know that we're on live because we've got several different interesting things to talk about tonight, including what to do if you catch a tagged bass and how all that works, and just whatever else we can think about with Caddo. So we'll be back here in about 5 minutes. Again, just stay tuned and let your friends know. And we'll be back after the countdown. Okay, well, we made it through another countdown with the kind of slow elevator type music going in the background, but hey, it works. Okay, so Dan, why don't you introduce yourself and maybe give us a little bit of history on the lake? I mean, I know a lot of the people in the Caddo Lake Fishing Report and around Oil City and the area up around the lake there probably know who you are and all that, but for those folks watching that may not, like I said, just introduction and, what's your story on Caddo Lake?
Well, Rex, first, thanks for having me on tonight. I'm proud to be here to talk to you and represent the Louisiana Greater Caddo Lake Association. We moved up to this area, the Blanchard and north of Shreveport area, in 1972. So I have been on and off the lake since 1972 and finally got an opportunity to build our house here in 98 on the lake itself. And I guess it wasn't too long after that I inherited this position as the president of the Caddo Lake Association. There's been several very storied people in front of me that kept it going. I think we go back somewhere in the 60s as the oldest documents I have found. At one time, I think Mr. Nix from Mooringsport used to hold the meetings at the channel marker around the pool table. So we've had quite a history and past. it wanes and it comes and it goes depending on what's going on the lake, of course, at the time. Good times, it kind of dwindles down a little bit, but let something happen or let something come up, and people will step up right quick to try and help out.
Yeah, and you mentioned the history of Caddo, and I got to say I'm kind of jealous because you're sitting outside and I can hear the birds chirping every now and then, beautiful scenery behind you, and I'm stuck in here in my office and man cave, so I'm a little jealous about that. But talking about the history, and I fished Caddo back in the '90s, some, and back when, what radio station was it that had the big bass deal every year? Was it KRMD? I forget who had that.
I think that's what it was, KRMD.
Yeah, and I fished that a couple of times, but that was back when, and I try to tell people this, that Caddo was not marked with the boat markers, the channel markers, boat road markers like it is now. Back then, you might have a sign on a tree, or there might be a marker every half a mile or so. So you've seen the lake kind of go through a pretty good, let's just say, change, and I would argue maybe positive change since then. Can you talk maybe just for a couple minutes about that, and then we'll get into some of these topics?
Sure. Of course, you're talking about days pre-Salvinia. So it was quite a bit different then. Also, we did a period of in the oil industry on the lake. Of course, that's played a huge part on the lake and the history of the lake. And several people argue the point that once upon a time they dumped the salt water back into the lake and the fish were more healthy and the weeds were less. Really hard to say. You talk to some of the biologists or some of the oil field people, and they'll tell you right quick there was more than just salt water in that water. So it's probably a good thing that is not dumped in the lake anymore. But that's always a contentious argument with people. The lake has seen a lot of changes over the years. Like we discussed just earlier, as far as the late or back history to it, ancient history possibly, the lake's been here forever. Some people want to say it was the earthquake and that did it and all, but actually, we're pretty well proven fact that it was the log jam. That log jam at one time on the Red River was over 100 miles long, and that held back an awful lot of water. And barge traffic, at one point, there was over 90 boats a day going from Shreveport to Jefferson.
Wow.
Now, remember, Texas was not a state at this time. So that was the jumping off point to the new territory, was Jefferson. So people and all their belongings were hopping boats in Shreveport, coming up from New Orleans and heading to the new territory of Texas.
Wow.
And that went to about 1875. Shortly thereafter was when they busted up the last of the logs. The lake then kind of turned into more or less, other than just the main channel, a series of pools. Some people described it as a sea of grass, and it was several pools that went all the way down through Soda Lake, all the way in towards the Shreveport area. And the only time you could really traffic it then was in the spring during high water. That was the period when the pearl divers were here. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
I did read about some of that.
They actually had Japanese pearl divers here, getting the mussels and getting pearls that were actually taken from here and sold in Tiffany's in New York.
Wow.
Then around 1900, when oil was discovered, that was the end of that. That's when they decided to finally build the dam, flood the lake, and decided it would be easier access to do it over water than it would be to do it through the swamp. So that's just basically the three main stages that the lake's been through in ancient history. So that's kind of more or less where we are today. It's a little bit higher than it was originally, but pretty much the same thing. And of course, now all barge traffic has stopped.
Yeah, I thought I'd, had read somewhere that I think the dam raised it about 2 feet or something like that. And we were talking about before the show, I read up, I wasn't living around here then, but that there was a little bit of controversy because a group, what was it, maybe couple of decades ago, had wanted to raise the lake even more and add more traffic to the lake, or try to make it navigable, or what went on with that? Do you remember?
There were several projects. One was called the Dangerfield Reach, when they were going to try and dig a canal to get barge traffic from Dangerfield, Texas, all the way back to the river. Several different things came up about that. One of them was residue from the ammunition plant that is buried under Caddo Lake, the PCBs and several other real nasty things that are down there. They decided it was probably best just to leave that undisturbed. So, and also too, you got two totally different lakes. You got the Louisiana side and you got the Texas side.
Right. 2
feet in Texas is going to basically, if you had 100 acres in Texas now and they raised it 2 feet, you might have an acre left at best.
Right.
Quite a bit of difference in elevation in the lake, the land area around the lake in the Texas side and Louisiana side. So it's a tough battle to try and please both sides at the same time.
Yeah, and we'll talk some more about a lot of that, a little bit further on into the show. But why don't we go ahead and let's get started, with kind of the main topics, we'll put it that way, and we'll see where this leads. So first thing I want to do is remind everybody, tag some friends, share this out on your Facebook pages and Facebook feeds and all that kind of good stuff. Or if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I want to remind everybody that May the 5th and 6th, that's Thursday and Friday of this week, the Lady Bass Anglers Association is having their tournament on Caddo. They're going to be launching and weighing in at Earl G. And yes, they are doing that on a Thursday and Friday, I think to avoid, weekend fishing traffic and all that. So if you're around the area, come out and watch them weigh in. They do a very good, very professional job. And those ladies can catch some fish. So I want to remind you of that. Dan, do y'all have anything coming up around the lake that you want to make people aware of coming up in the near future? Maybe anything with the association or anything?
Well, we are still right in the beginning stages of our Tagged Fish event, our Tagged Fish Rodeo that we've been running. So we're 1 month down. We've had 13 fish turned in so far. And when I say fish, that's because we've tagged more than just bass. Wildlife and Fisheries has tagged just about everything that swims in the lake. So anybody fishing on Caddo Lake has the opportunity to catch a tagged fish. We have had 3 crappie turned in already this year, which is way above our normal average. They do tag mostly bass because more people fish for bass, and we want the fish to be caught. So that's our big thing going on right now. We are working on a thing for the kids with Caddo Parks and Recreation that's going to be coming up in June and July. It's still in its infancy stages, you might say, but we've been talking with the folks there, and I think we're going to be able to help them out and take part in this with them.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up the screen for that. This is the Walter B. Jacobs Memorial Nature Park post, which is part of the, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the Caddo Parks and Recreation System for the parish. And so anyway, if you go to Facebook and just search for Walter B. Jacobs Memorial Nature Park, you'll find their page, and you can see this is their Summer Camp 2022 going on. Now, you said survival skills. So is this like legit, they got stranded out on an island in the middle of Caddo and had to survive on their own, survivor style, or what is this?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm not 100% sure right now. Like I say, I just got involved this week with it, meeting with Stacy Gray, who's the director, and does a lot of fine work with all the event planning in Caddo Parks and Recreation, a super lady. She reached out to me because where they have been trying to fish with the kids in the past, they have not done real well. So we're going through some of the members in our groups and seeing if we can't find them a place where they can spread out a little bit and maybe catch some fish this summer.
Yeah, are y'all looking more, for bank or areas that they can access from the bank? Or y'all thinking about taking them out in boats or anything? Or have y'all even discussed any of that part of it yet?
This will be from the bank. We're looking at our good friends at Drift In Landing, who are also members of our organization, and they're looking at possibly allowing us to use their fishing docks and piers, and maybe we'll go in and feed them one of them world famous Drift In burgers and see if we can't give them a nice day on the lake.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good event. So I'm guessing that if somebody wants to volunteer, they can just reach out to you on Facebook or go over to the Facebook page for the Caddo Parks and all that, and and reach out to them if you want to try to assist with that. Yeah, and I'm assuming survival skills, teaching them how to fish and all that. I don't know. Maybe they will drop them off out in the middle of Caddo. We'll see. That could be pretty interesting.
Well, normally we would be doing our hooked on fishing for the kids at the park, but
Right.
unfortunately, COVID hit us for the last 2 years, and now the park is not opened yet, and our fishing pier has not been put back, so we're going to miss it. We've been very active in it for about 20 years now. We're on about our 29th year, I think. The next one we'll be able to have. And we have been big sponsors in that. We normally run the fishing part of it and do the scales and the weigh-in for it. And I really, really hate that we have missed this many years in a row. It's so hard to get things back together after you stop for a while. But hopefully with next year, we'll be able to really get back on that. We have had a fantastic turnout for that in past years.
Yeah, and I see our good friend Jeremy Gallman was commenting just a little bit ago. Jeremy is kind of heading up the high school fishing league around here. The North Louisiana High School Fishing League? Anyway, so good to see Jeremy commenting in. And I don't know, maybe in this deal right here, Jeremy, maybe we could get some of the high schoolers, if they're going to be around on those dates, to maybe help kind of mentor some of these kids or help them fish a little bit. And maybe we could do some of that. All right, but I want to circle back, though, for a second to, let me see if I can get the right page pulled up here. Let's see. All right, so I'm back to your page, and this is one of the maps with the tags. So I want to dwell for a little bit on the tagged fish and the rodeo program. So tell me a little bit more about, how did this tagging fish program start? I did a little bit of research on it, and I think I saw some articles that started like 2017 maybe was the first year. So how did this whole tagging fish system come about?
Well, if you'll remember, about that time, the lake was in pretty rough shape, Salvinia-wise.
Right.
It got pretty much to the point where people had quit coming. So we raised some money and wanted to do something to promote the lake and get people coming back to the lake. So we got with the wildlife and fisheries. And at first we were going to just give them money to spray Salvinia, and they told us not to do that,
Right.
that they could spray our money, and 2 weeks later, they'd never know it.
Right.
So this was actually their idea. Jeff Sibley, who you had on last week, and Kevin Houston got with our group, and they had seen this tagging program done on other lakes with great success. So the first year we tried it, we were a little bit leery. We had a little money, but not a lot of money, but we were able to get it up and running. And we did 50 fish the first year. Wildlife and Fisheries does all the tagging. They electroshock them, tag them, and release them. And then they send me a spreadsheet that they've made up that has the tag numbers and the sponsors' names for each tag. And as they're caught, I ask the people where they caught them, and then I send the information to Wildlife and Fisheries, and they send that picture back that you had before of exactly where in the lake they released what the fish was, what size the fish was, and where, of course, they released it. And then that way we can track the fish from where they were released to where they were caught. All of our sponsors have tracking maps, and I try to go by and update them as fast as I can. Sometimes they catch them faster than I can get through there to update them. But basically, that's what it is. Now, just to get into it a little bit deeper, we are a nonprofit organization. Mm-hmm. So when we started this, there were several things that I insisted upon. One was that it was not going to be a money-making project. Two, that it was going to be strictly to promote Caddo Lake. And three, that it was not going to be just for the guy in the big glitter boat. I wanted everybody to have an equal chance, whether they were sitting on a bank with a cane pole or they were out in an $80,000 bass boat.
Right.
And so that has worked out real well, surprisingly. Yes, we do have some tournament fishermen that catch tags, but I would say the biggest majority are caught by either weekend anglers, children fishing off the bank, fathers and sons out on a brim fishing trip. I had a 78-year-old man here in Oil City catch a catfish in a hoop net. So as long as it's a legal catch, we honor that tag.
Well,
the only money that is generated is through the sponsors. The sponsors are charged $5 per tag for each tag they sponsor. That goes to the price of the tags that we buy the tags to give to the Wildlife and Fisheries, and all of our print material the tracking maps, our handouts, reward posters, that sort of thing. So basically, we don't have a lot of expense. The tags are around $300 for 100, and printing runs me. We use Louisiana Association for the Blind, and that usually runs about 150. So if we can keep it in that range, nobody's making any money off of it, but we're having a good time doing it.
Yeah, and I've noticed a pretty good bit of people posting, that they've been catching them, and I imagine it's pretty interesting data, not just for the Greater Caddo Lake Association, but also for the wildlife and fisheries, because I'm going to guess that they're weighing the fish and recording some other data, and they can see the fish movement. And speaking of that, can you remember off the top of your head maybe what's the longest distance that any of these fish have moved or been tagged and then caught in another area?
We've had two, one bass and one white perch or crappie. The bass was originally tagged and released in Bonham's Arm and James Bayou. Mm-hmm. That would be about channel marker 42, B42, coming up from the lake. It was caught 2 years later on the North Shore by the dam.
Wow, that's a pretty good.
That's
run.
A long road to haul. Then we had a white perch that was tagged in the canals down by the dam where the old Catfish restaurant was in April. Mm-hmm. The following December, it was caught at Johnson's Ranch in the river.
Wow.
So that baby traveled the entire length of the lake. And what we have found is just that the crappie move tremendous distances, and the bass, for the most part, do not move at all.
Well, that's interesting.
Interesting fact on that. The first year we did this, when we did the 50 fish, the wildlife and fisheries, they originally shot the fish and got them in the boat and revived them and tagged them and weighed them and measured them, and they were just turning them loose wherever they happened to be at the time.
Right.
Well, they got a Kentucky bass from the mooring sport between the bridges and turned it loose on the state line in Tar Island Slough. 8 days later, it was caught from a guy fishing off the bank at Mooringsport.
It went back home or back to its area.
Yes, that's what we have found, is that pretty much they go right back where they come from, and probably 98% of them over the years. I had two called in this year from 2019 that were caught and tagged and released up the bayou. They had grown 3 inches in 3 years and were still within 50 yards of where they were released.
Well, that goes back to there's a YouTube channel, Ken Smith Fishing, and Ken's a very interesting guy out of Texas. Make a long story really short. He had on one of the head biologists for Texas Parks and Wildlife, and they had done a tracking study with a radio tracker on fish in Texas at Toledo Bend. And the fish that they tracked, the vast majority of them, they had a couple of them that were long distance swimmers, but the vast majority of them had stayed within, they said that they hadn't swam more than 400 yards total distance over the period of a year. Now, they were checking them every 2 weeks, so within that 2 weeks, they could have swam, a mile, a couple of miles away and then come back. But the point was that the majority of those fish were staying near their home area, and kind of what you've described is that same phenomenon where most of the fish, not necessarily all of them, but most of the fish are eventually probably going to make it back to their home area.
That's the way it appears. And some of them, like I say, very rapidly, how they know, I'm sure that Kentucky bass had never been to Tar Island Slough, but he knew that wasn't his home. Now, right. How he knew which way to swim, I have no idea. But literally in 8 days, that fish swam almost 8 miles.
I just tell people it's kind of like ducks. How do they know which way to fly? I guess or the trout. We all see the trout migrations up the river. How do they just know which river to swim up, and and where to stop? They just kind of know. So I brought up a picture here. Is this what the current tags look like this year?
Yes, sir. That's them. And everyone's asking why 2 tags. We did this last year and this year. And that is to do a tag retention study for the wildlife and fisheries to see just how well they stay in. So that's one of the things I always ask. What color are they and how many were in it? And what we have found is that the tags do, for the most part, real well. Like I say, I had 2 this year that had been in for 3 years. Fish showed no signs of any wear or tear on the fish. What we do find is as soon as the water warms up, those plastic tags will start to grow algae.
Right.
And we've had some that have been missed because they didn't even realize it was a tag. And when you get one, but these people were still able to rub all of that off and get my phone number off of that tag after 3 years.
Yeah, so the key is pay attention. It's not necessarily just green growth coming off the fish. It's probably a tag, especially if it's up there on that upper fin. So they're all tagged in basically the same location, correct, for people that are out there bass fishing? Well, and I guess
right along the dorsal fin, rear part of the dorsal fin. What that looks like, and I wanted to get this out there too. If you do catch one, a lot of them are slot fish. The Wildlife and Fisheries tags 100 fish in one day. Wow. And they will tag the entire Louisiana side of the lake. You can't go 100 yards down the bank on Louisiana side without going past a tagged fish. Also, don't throw anything back in the lake before you look. They have put tags in grinnell. They have put tags in jackfish. They have put tags in goose. They have put tags in everything. The good friends at Drift In do a lot of trot lining and limb lining, and they wanted a big catfish. They tagged a 40-pound blue cat one year.
Wow.
So it has really been fun and interesting, and all this extra stuff is stuff we never even counted on. All the data that we're getting, being able to see and track year after year. So it's been as much fun as it is a labor also.
So if somebody catches a tagged fish, then the procedure is, let's assume they catch a slot fish, because Caddo's full of slot fish. That's a whole other discussion. But they don't need to keep the slot fish, obviously. So they just need to pay attention to the tag. If it's got a little algae on it, knock the algae off, get the phone number.
Well, Rex, here's what they need to do. If it's a slot fish, you're supposed to return that fish back to the lake immediately. What you want to do is cut the tag off. Okay. If you have something you can do it with. Those tags look just like the old price tags that used to be in clothes. It's a plastic T. Mm-hmm. So if you pull it out, you're going to pull a hole in the fish. If you can cut it off, you're better off just nipping it off, let the fish go, and then all the information you need will be on that tag.
Yeah, and obviously take a picture of it too while you're at it.
Yes, if you can, if at all possible, try and get a picture for us. Everybody likes to see a picture.
And I would assume, even if, like me, I don't keep any bass because, well, I'm too lazy to clean them. Well, it's not really that. I just hate cleaning them. But so even if I catch an over that's a tagged fish, better to take a picture, cut the tag off, correct? And then give you a call, right?
That's it. That's the information that's going to be on that tag. I've actually had people call me, put the fish back in the lake with the tag still in it, and never even see the number on the other side of the tag. One side of the tag has my phone number on it, which I don't know if that's a good thing since I got several hundred fish out there swimming with my phone number on it. It's not exactly a private number anymore.
Right.
But the other side of the tag says reward and has, this year it's a 4-digit number, starts with a 0. We're interested in the last 3 digits.
Okay.
I have the spreadsheet on my phone, so I'll answer the phone and put you on hold and go to my spreadsheet, and I'll find out exactly who the sponsor was and what you won. And then then comes the tricky part. Luckily, I have been able pretty much to get up with the people that have won. Either I've gone out in my boat and handed their prize to them on the lake. Usually, though, I'm able to go to one of our sponsors and leave it there or meet up with the people. I have several times gone to weigh-ins and delivered prizes there. I've had as many as deliver 4 in one day, in one afternoon, running here, there, and yonder, handing out prizes. Sponsors have been great. We can't do this without sponsors. We try to use local people that everybody knows. We're not trying to get too big because I don't want to get bigger than I can handle at this point. Right. I still have a full-time job, and I work the weekend. So if it wasn't for the good folks at Drift In picking up some slack for me and handing out prizes, I'd really be in trouble. But basically, that's the way it works, is once you've called me, I pretty much take it from there. And I have even had to mail prizes to people who came out of town, went to a tournament, caught one, and didn't call me till they got back home.
So, in other words, you're A, pretty busy, and B, pretty accommodating too.
I try to do the best I can. I actually had a couple from Dallas that came and were staying at a bed and breakfast in Jefferson, Texas. They'd gone to Johnson's Ranch and got a guide. He brought them over to Cool Point, and they caught one of those crappie right there.
Mm-hmm.
They called me when they were back at their bed and breakfast in Jefferson. They were leaving to go back to Dallas the next day. So I hopped in the truck, and it was one of our tags worth $100. And I ran to Jefferson and handed him a $100 bill and said, "Dinner's on me."
Wow, well that's pretty good, especially considering gas prices these days. You probably burned about half of that.
Well, that was a year or two ago, so
okay,
it wasn't quite that bad.
Okay, that
but
makes it
I
better.
will do whatever it takes to make sure that the people are taken care of.
Yeah,
It's not a lot, although we do have $1,000 fish swimming out there. And we have given that $1,000 away 2 out of the 6 years.
Well,
and it's actually been caught 4 times, twice after the tournament was over. But for those who are saying, you'll never catch nothing, it's just a needle in a haystack, that's not true.
Look, I've seen a lot of posts for tagged fish, from your association and all that. So I would say you actually have a pretty darn good chance of catching one on Caddo.
You really do, and we've had such interesting stuff. I've got a family, the Havis clan, I call them. We have had son, father, and grandfather all catch a tagged fish in 3 separate years.
Wow!
So 3 different generations have caught tagged fish.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, so I want to put a question up. So, a good friend of mine, Pat Gunderson, who I've actually had in one of my videos, he says, now, he's asking us, full disclosure, neither one of us, I don't think you are, Dan, are wildlife biologists, but he says, do you think the fish movement holds true during the spawn as well? My completely anecdotal opinion on that, just from years and years of experience, is the fish are going to, and Pat, we've talked about this too, I think a lot of the fish, especially at least the bass, I'm not a crappie guy or a catfish guy, but at least the bass, a lot of those fish on Caddo, the majority of them, obviously not all, the majority of them have a home range. And I don't think that they deviate that much from it. There's always exceptions, like Dan mentioned a couple of them that swam pretty good, but I would argue they were probably swimming to get back to their home range or something. So they're going to have an area that they spawn that's usually going to be relatively close to their home range. So they may have some movement for the spawn and back, but that would just be my opinion on it versus some of the true reservoirs or the river systems where those fish tend to travel more than they would in Caddo Lake or in some of the other lakes around here. So again, that's kind of my opinion, but all right.
That pretty well plays out with what we've seen with the data. The tagging is done the first week in April, so a lot of the bass have already spawned by that time. But what we have found is you get, I would say, lateral movement. Mm-hmm. They may move from shallow water to the nearest deepest water in the summertime, but as far as, let's say, vertical movement up and down the bank, it's not that much.
Right.
Like I say, one of those bass that was caught this year was caught at the very end of the channel in James Bayou. That's where it was released, and I asked the guy, I had him on the phone, and I pulled it up and saw where it was released, and I said, where's the pumping station at from where you're sitting? And he turned around and said, it's about 20 yards behind me. So in 3 years, that fish was still right where it was released.
Yeah. Very, very interesting on those movements. Okay, let's see. Michael Burke says we need the tagging project to Wallace Lake. Yeah, we need to do something about Wallace, at least to raise funds to try to get some of the Salvini out of there. That's a whole other discussion, and I do plan to make a couple of trips down to Wallace Lake. Probably going to have to go on a John boat or Piro or something like that, or get somebody with a mud boat and go check that out. Because it's kind of being forgotten about with Bistineau and Caddo and the situations there. But anyway, that's for a topic for another show. But appreciate the comment.
As far as the tagging goes, anybody can order these tags. There are places up in Washington State that we order them from. You get a tagging gun and 100 tags for somewhere around $200 or $300, and all the printing on the tags and whatever you want printed on it can be printed on them. So anybody could take on this project. I know the Cash Bash tagging program. They use fishermen to tag theirs.
Yeah,
So
we did some at a couple of tournaments. And I was going to ask you that, so it brings up an interesting deal. So apparently you don't have to have any kind of permit or permission from wildlife and fisheries or whatever to tag fish. Is that pretty much your understanding?
that's my understanding. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. We're very fortunate that the Wildlife and Fisheries has volunteered their time to do this and work with us on this. It's been to their benefit too. I think they have used the results that they've gotten from our tagging program to do other tagging programs in the state. But even during COVID, they were more than willing to get out there and tag those fish. And it was a big boon. There was no tournaments in 21. There was lots of people fishing, and we had a record number of fish caught that year. And I was kind of proud that we were able to do that and give the people something to do. We normally run 25 to 30 tags turned in, which is phenomenal for the lake, the size of it is, to get 30-something% turned back in. But that year it was almost 40 tags. We were closing in on half of those fish being caught. So, and we had tags called in all summer long. I look to see that a little bit this year. Also, we're a little ahead of schedule on being turned in. Normally, when we first started this, and you probably know this as well as anybody, Rex, come June, most of the tournaments would be over.
Right.
Starts getting hot, hard to keep fish alive in a live well with all that 90-degree water. Other interests come up. Kids are out of school, people going on vacation, other sports coming up. So we would have a big lull. June and July, we might have one or two turned in. And then we'd have a few more little rallies right at the end. It goes all the way through Labor Day. 5 p.m. Labor Day is where I cut it off. I'm not answering the phone no more. The first cool snaps in August, late August, people venture back out to the lake, and we'll have another little rally there towards the end and usually have several more turned in. Looks like, though, because of so many tournaments being postponed for so many years and things, that they're going to run a little longer than usual, and that's going to put more pressure and more people on the lake. So we look to have a really good year.
And speaking of that, as we kind of wrap this part of it up and move into a couple of other topics, when's your next meeting, and is your association open to the general public, or how does the Greater Caddo Lake Association work? So can anybody just show up?
We are wide open as a barn door. We would love everybody and anybody who'd like to take part. We meet the second Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. And thanks to the town of Oil City, we're able to meet at town hall. We actually meet in the in the town's chamber meeting area at town hall at 7 p.m. second Tuesday every month. I invite everybody and anybody who'd like to come and talk. Sometimes we have Jeff Sibley and Wildlife and Fisheries usually come and give us a state of the lake. Doug Rainwater with Caddo Parks and Recreation, he comes and gives us updates occasionally on what's going on with the park and other things. That's one thing our organization has also strived to do, is try to be a go-between between the government agencies and different entities and the lake users and residents. We've got a very good and always have had a good relationship with most all of our government entities. Our commissioner, Todd Hopkins, for this area, he lives on Caddo. He's been great about anything and everything Caddo Lake. I know when the channel markers were brought up a while back, he assured that he would get out and inventory and find out and get those fixed as soon as possible. Caddo Parks and Recreation, if people will take a second and look at all the public ramps on the Louisiana side of the lake, there's a sign that gives all of the rules and regulations and creel limits. You look at the very bottom, it says that sign was sponsored by GCLA. We actually paid for all those signs and had the Caddo Parish Sign Works make them for us. Wildlife and Fisheries, there was some place in Baton Rouge, it was going to be astronomical for them to have them made, the price. So they came to us. And at that time, we actually had the president of Caddo Parks and Recreation was in our organization. And he stepped right up to the plate and went and had the sign company make them and install them for us. We paid for the signs and for the installation, but they actually made them for us.
Yeah, and you and I were talking before the show, and we conversed, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago about the boat ramp at Earl G and the silt, that's built up on either side. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you reach out to your contacts to see about trying to get them up there to kind of dredge that out on the boat ramp and clear that up?
I did, and I hope, I'm not sure if it happened yet or not. I actually, Friday coming home from work, I was following the parish backhoe, and I was hoping and praying it was going to pull in, but it didn't. It went on north. But yes, I do have some contacts, and I will check back with them tomorrow and see where we're at on that. It is the government, and the wheels turn slowly, but sometimes squeaky wheel gets the grease, as they say. So I'll keep it up, and we'll get it done. But they have been really, really good to work with us over the years on the lake and to keep things up. A lot of times, things that don't happen just like that is because they don't know about it.
Right.
So if somebody doesn't get word out about what's happening, that's the only way it's going to get fixed.
Yeah.
But yes, we meet every Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month. So anyone who'd like to take part or join the group. Now that's another thing. We don't ask for money on this rodeo. You don't have to register. You don't have to pay anything. But we have a little caveat to that, in that if you're an active member of our group, we will pay an extra $100 for any tagged fish caught. So there's a little bonus there. So it's $15 a year for the entire family. And we normally do our membership drive from January to April. You can join at any time. Good folks at Drift In, they have membership forms there. I usually post some on our Facebook page occasionally. You can print it off. But you can feel free to join, and you can be as active or inactive as you want. But that helps us keep everything going that we do.
Very interesting. I need to make the next meeting and go ahead and join, and then start looking for some pink tagged fish in my shallow water bass fishing that I like to do.
Well, you need to get off that Texas side and get back over here to Louisiana where you belong.
You're right. I hang out on that Texas side a lot. All right, so let's switch gears for a minute, and let's see. We're at about 47 minutes, so we got a few more minutes here. Let's switch gears for a second. Let me switch screens, and so I'm in the showing the Caddo Lake Fishing Report group, Facebook group, and you post quite frequently in there, and usually you're posting some of these pretty good mess of catfish going on there. So, I bass fish 99% of the time. So every now and then I want to try on this show and in some of my other posts to give people some information on other species of fish, because, there are other things besides bass out there. So kind of describe, maybe not your honey holes or whatever, but maybe some of the areas and some of the things you like to do to be able to catch a good mess of catfish. And you do, I think, quite a bit of crappie fishing too.
Yep. I really enjoy it. The gentleman you see there in the picture has been my fishing partner for the catfish for probably the last 15 years or so. He was formerly a chaplain for Willis Knighton Hospice, and he would go see his patients every week, and some of them lived around the area, and he'd talk fishing with them, but he would take orders for fish, and we would go catch them on Saturdays, and he would clean them and deliver fish to his patients all week. Some of them may be the last fish they ever got to eat. But so we had a mission going there, and the Lord blessed us and allowed us to catch those fish. I don't mind telling anybody where we do it. 90% of our fish come out of Marshall Break, which is right off the big lake, right where James Bayou meets the big lake. You can probably fish that area year-round and catch catfish. We catch them all with rod and reel, and 99% of the time we're using night crawlers under a cork. One thing we do a little different maybe is the fact that we use multiple rods and reels. Sometimes I've got as many as 4 out at once. The biggest mistake I see people making out there is staying on that trolling motor. Mm-hmm. When we get out there, we will pull up into a group of trees and put out anchors on both ends of the boat. And then we will cast out 3-4 rods, different targets, different trees around the boat. And sometimes they will bite just as fast as it hits the water. That cork will go down. But sometimes you have to sit there a little while and wait them out. So if you're on that trolling motor running constantly, you're going to go past a lot of fish that are there. So that's the biggest mistake that I see people make that are coming out to try and do what we do. There's one particular time of the year when it's better than any time else, and that's in the late or mid to late fall when the cormorants are roosting in there. Mm-hmm. Those cormorants eat fish all day, and I won't say what they do with that fish at night, but the next morning those catfish are under them so thick that you could almost walk on their back.
Fertilizing the water, let's just put it that way.
That is some phenomenal fishing right there.
Really?
It's unbelievable, the number of fish you catch and how fast you can catch them.
So the cormorants, the water turkeys, do have a purpose in life other than just aggravating us all, right?
There's some pretty amazing birds if you actually get out there and watch them and what they can do as far as herding schools of shad. Now the crappie fishing, that if you can get off into it, it's just as addicting and just as hard as bass fishing. To stay on those crappie, you've got to fish them constantly. It's kind of like learning to fish a jig bass fishing. You just got to leave everything else at home and just fish it.
Right.
Well, you got to leave them bass rods at home and get that jigging pole and just get out there and fish it.
Yeah, they
move tremendously, though. That's one thing we have found from the tagging study. I wish that we had more data. We just don't tag as many of those as we do bass. So the data is just really starting to come in on those. But we have found that they move tremendously. From the time they spawn, they are immediately leaving that area and heading for deep water.
Yeah.
Everyone that we've had caught after April is heading for the nearest deep water, whether it be the main big lake, Mooringsport, up the river. The big question that we haven't figured out on those is what makes them go where?
Right.
What makes them stay in Mooringsport? What makes them go up to Highway 2, up James Bayou? And what makes them go to the river? We don't know. And the wildlife and fisheries biologists don't seem to know either. So yeah, I would love to find out.
The knee-jerk answer would be, they're following the shad because those suckers are basically, just freshwater piranhas with bigger mouths. I mean, because you talk to any of the biologists, especially just like in pond or small lake management, once you get, the crappie going, you got a big problem because you got to keep those suckers under control. They'll starve everything else because they eat everything. I would argue maybe they're following the shad, but who knows? But let me ask you this. So when you say deep water on Caddo, let's define deep water on Caddo. So around the Mooringsport Bridge, it's what, probably 15 to 20 foot deep. There's a little 20 plus foot deep, I think, on the south side of it, or whatever. So when you're talking, they go to the bayou and go to deep water. Is that 6 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot?
I would say 8 to 10 foot. Now you get out in the middle of the big lake and some of those stump fields, even in the summertime, there's some 14-foot water out there.
Right.
12, 14-foot water. You come up James Bayou, there's a few holes that will almost hit 20. Most of it, though, is probably 12 to 14 foot. Deep, of course, like you say on Caddo, is very relative speaking. I'll tell you right now, when I built my house here, I had a track hoe come in and dig out my boat slip as deep as they could get it. Mm-hmm. I have maybe 8 to 10 at the most feet of water in there off that dock. But when there's no salvinia, they will swim through that creek that's not a foot deep out there to get into that boat slip.
Really?
And I don't mean just a couple. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now. This year I caught 100 between Christmas and New Year's.
Wow.
Standing on my dock.
So they like that little dig out in there, don't they? That's just it's amazing that they can find that.
Dig a hole and they will find it. Yes, there was no road map saying, hey, this guy just dug an 8-foot hole back here. They found it the very first year it was dug.
Wow. Amazing fish.
So it's pretty amazing what these things will do. But yes, relatively speaking, they are going to go from 2 foot where they spawned out to the nearest 6, 8, 10, 12 foot as the I'm sure as the water warms, they're looking for that perfect line there, which
Right.
probably in the middle of summertime on Caddo is going to be 10 to 12 foot deep
Right.
to find that cool spot.
All right, so let's we're at what time? We're about 55 minutes, and we can sit here and talk fishing all night if you want. It's fine with me. But let's talk about one more thing because it's getting that time now. Have you been brim fishing lately?
Not specifically just for brim, but we catch a lot of brim bycatch while we're out there fishing. Like I say, we fish night crawlers under a cork.
Right.
We have not hit any beds yet per se, but we have gotten into some really big red ears in a few spots, and we've caught in a few spots multiple fish where it looked like they were trying to bed up. Now today we caught 37 catfish in Marshall Break and did not catch a single brim. We caught one barfish and I think 3 or 4 goop, but we did not catch a single brim all day long. And we fished shallow water several times. We were at Little Sandy out there where it wasn't less than 4 foot deep in the middle out there. So we hit several spots where you would normally catch brim and didn't catch one. Last week we went over to Jap Island.
Mm-hmm.
We caught some on Jap Island, and we came across the Big Sandy where we normally would catch brim and did not get a bite.
Really?
So
that's amazing because a lot of us were fishing around Big Sandy and those areas, looking for bedfish, bass fishing, and Big Green Break and all that, and we were seeing a lot of brim that were up, but they weren't making beds yet. But I hadn't seen any reports of people just catching, huge numbers of brim yet. And I was up around Hogwalla Saturday and Sunday up around that area. And I saw some brim, but it wasn't like there were beds everywhere. And, I was ready to go grab my cork and go get some crickets and go back up there and catch some. So it's kind of, I don't know, the brim just seemed to be a little weird this year maybe.
I agree totally. I don't know what the story is. We've fished the bank a couple of times looking for them and just have not found them. But that one red ear you showed may be the biggest one I've ever caught. That thing had to be close to 10 inches long. That picture did not do it justice. It was big.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
That, sir, was a red ear.
All right. Well, we'll start wrapping up, and Pat Gunderson had asked another question, but I guess he asked it right as you were answering about registering for the tags. So, Pat, if you missed that, no, you do not have to register for the GCLA's tags, although good idea to be a member because it doesn't cost much and you might win an extra $100. All right, let me switch screens here real quick. So I am posted, I usually post quite a few pictures and things like that in the Caddo Lake Fishing Report and on Facebook, and I hadn't posted many in the last week and a half because I've been working a little bit more, but I have caught a few fish, and if you pay attention in that fish's mouth, you'll see what I've been catching them on. And I would remind folks I did a whole video on the wobblehead last year, so that's a pretty good clue as to what I caught some on this past weekend. And yesterday I actually caught some on a whopper plopper. So that was lots of fun because they were absolutely crushing it. But anyway, all right. Well, I really appreciate you being on.
One more thing there, you're talking about bass. I did pick my rod up this year a little bit. That little 1/4 ounce black buzzbait is hard to beat in May on Caddo Lake.
Oh, yes. That is, you're not supposed to be telling everybody the secret of the little bitty black buzzbait. And
yes, sir.
I guess I should give a little bit of a plug out to Funkbuster because, Bradley Virgilito, who catches a lot of fish and wins a lot of all of our money in tournaments and all that, we donate a lot to Bradley's daughter's college fund, I guess. But anyway, in all seriousness, Paul and them came out with a buzzbait they call the Angry Verge, which is a buzzbait that has frog hooks on it. And that little thing, when you get the smaller one, can be deadly, especially starting from now on through the summer. So that's actually a pretty good bait and a pretty good tip. It actually runs pretty good, if I remember right, to the left, which is perfect. Don't tune it. Throw it by the cypress trees to the side and let the buzzbait steer its way back towards the tree where you can actually bump that tree, because a lot of time the bass will crush it when it bumps the tree. I don't know what it is, whether they can hear the noise or the change in the tempo of the buzz bait or what it is, but a lot of time that'll trigger a strike. So anyway, we've had catfishing, we've had crappie or white perch, we've talked about brim, and we talked about bass tonight and tagging fish. What an
Rex,
informative show.
Have you ever wondered what a buzz bait is supposed to imitate?
Well, that's a good question. I've never seen a buzzbait in the wild just swimming across the water. But I would
Let me tell you what.
Say an injured fish, probably.
Get one of those green chameleon lizards and throw it in the water and see what it does.
Oh, really?
You would think that it would swim like a alligator or something like that. No, it runs wide open on its back feet with its head up in the air and the tail straight out behind it. It looks like a little motorboat going across the water.
I may have to give that a try. Send him out there as the scout and let him run across the water. If he gets eaten, come back with my buzzbait. I wonder if that's legal in a tournament. That wouldn't actually be live bait fishing because I wouldn't put a hook in him. I'd just let him run out there. Good suggestion. All right. Well, I really appreciate you being on tonight, Dan. You're welcome back anytime that the Lake Association has any kind of news that you want to get out. Just give me a shout and we'll be glad to get it out there. I'm going to try to make the next meeting as well. I'll try to commit to going up there and paying my registration or dues or whatever and giving my 2 cents and maybe win an extra $100.
That'd be great. That'll be 1 week from tomorrow.
All right, perfect. I will put it on my calendar. And if we can get the ladies on with the parks and all that about the kids deal or something like that, just let me know and be glad to have them on coming up before too long.
Great. I'll try and get you hooked up. What time is the ladies weighing in?
Let me take a look over here and see. Hold on. We'll flip screens real quick. Let's see if they've got it on there. Okay. Did they post it yet? I don't know if they posted. I want to say, but don't quote me on this, I want to say that they're going to weigh in. Usually have some of the girls or some of the ladies watching. I want to say that their weigh-in is going to start around 2 or 3 o'clock. Here we go, 3:30 p.m. weigh-ins right here. Let's see if I can make that a little larger for everybody.
That'll be at the park?
Yes, sir. That'll be at the park. Now, I don't know if they're going to be there where the pavilion used to be or if they've got permission. I'm not sure if they've opened the park back up yet or they got permission. I'm sure they probably did if the park's not open yet. But they'll be right there somewhere. It'll be easy to find them. So.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, that is the end of the show for tonight. Again, very interesting conversations. And we'll do it again before too long.
See ya.
All right. See you later, Dan.